Hey everybody, welcome into Lucas Oil Stadium. This is Snap Judgments for the podcast. I am Austin Ward. That is my good friend Jeremy Birmingham.
Hello.
A very special guest. It's good to see you. What have you been up to?
Well, I've just been enjoying Indianapolis. It's the grayest city in America, except for my hometown, of course, of Toledo, Ohio. And so I'm just feeling at home and really just glad to be taking in day one of Big Ten Media Days. We got Kevin Warren. We got Jim Harbaugh, who said, use your brain or something like that. I mean, it felt like just a back to normal session.
I wondered if Jim Harbaugh would try and act more normal this year after, having some success last season. We know what happened in November in the Big House and getting a championship. It was a little bit weird. I pointed it out to you earlier when we walked in. To our right, there's a new banner up, and that string of 4 straight Ohio State titles has an M now next to it on the far right. I thought maybe, he'd relax a little bit, but instead he was weirder than ever. He seemed to not know how conference schedules work or if Power 5 teams exist in some capacity. And then once he was done, he just stood at the podium for about 3 minutes when he didn't have to.
He just sort of leaned into it, and that's great. I mean, at this point, the proof is in the pudding for him in Michigan. They won the Big Ten last year. To the victor goes the spoils, right? And in this case, it's the spoil is be as weird as you want, and people will just have to accept it. And it is who he is. And I think at some point, maybe a few years ago, you thought, well, there's no way he can be this way, right? But he is. And it's now working. He was asked a number of times about Ohio State and how they're going to maintain that level of where they were against Ohio State a year ago. Didn't say anything, reckless, didn't put any bulletin board material up there. And I think that it's probably a good idea. Last year, there was a lot of conversation here from Michigan about we're focusing on Ohio State more than ever. And I think for them now, the idea is we have to maintain what we did, and that seemed to be their primary message.
Yeah, he lumped in, Jim Harbaugh was asked about his goals, and he said beat Michigan State and beat Ohio State in the same year. We know what they still haven't accomplished in that regard, and I don't think it would be wise to, at this point, if you're Jim Harbaugh or any of the 3 Michigan players in this building with us today, to add any extra fuel to Ohio State's fire, because they already did that in November and December, and standing on third and all these other comments that were made, Aiden Hutchinson and others. Like, Ohio State has already internalized that. They don't need to hear more in July right before training camp starts. And to this point, I think they've managed that a lot better than they have in previous years, where they would be so braggadocious about what was going to come down the pike for them. It was going to be their year. I think maybe part of that is a realization that their roster is nowhere near 1 through 85 what Ohio State has.
There's not, but they do have key parts coming back, and that's what Jim Harbaugh was really harping on Tuesday morning, is that, they have Cade McNamara, who he really believes in, and said it's going to be very hard for anyone to take that starting quarterback job away from him. I don't know that I buy that, actually. I mean, I think J.J. McCarthy provides them a different gear to their offense than
he can throw a 360 pass.
Right. I mean, he can do a lot of different things, and you don't have to always look where you're throwing the ball, okay? We've learned that in the last few years of football, right? The quarterbacks have decided you don't even have to look in the direction you're throwing it anymore. Football's wild now. It's super fun. And that's what makes me excited. So I think Michigan's offense is going to be a lot better than people give it credit for, but the defense certainly lost some pieces. And when we're talking about that from an Ohio State perspective, well, obviously the Ohio State offense should be pretty good. And so I do think they have to realize some of the key parts that they had a year ago are not going to be there, and that does change the little bit of the way that you walk and talk.
So, if the Michigan segment of Big Ten Media Days was a little bit more boring or bizarre than maybe in years past,
it was equally bizarre but more boring.
Yeah, okay, that's a fair assessment. Kevin Warren seemed to be ramping up, projecting strength, aggression. That the Big Ten, obviously, they made the moves earlier in the month with USC and UCLA, and they're talking about that. They have broadcast deals that are in the works that are potentially going to make teams in this league near $100 million per year, which is crazy to think about. And there's the possibility that more expansion could be in the works. Now that we did talk to Kevin Warren earlier on the podcast, he was our first guest. We appreciate that time with him and tried to get a little bit more insight on how that would work. And I talked to some other people around the Big Ten in decision-making roles. So that, it doesn't have to be done necessarily by the time the broadcast deal is struck expansion. There's going to be provisions built in. So let's say that Notre Dame or Stanford or Washington or Oregon are presented as potential options. This contract that the Big Ten is going to sign is not going to be null and void if they further expand beyond that. There's going to be dollar amounts built in. I think that's significant because that means They don't have to tell Notre Dame by next week you have to be in or out.
Well, I mean, expansion is such a key part of what everyone's doing right now. Obviously, the SEC really took that by the reins last year with Oklahoma and Texas, but it was the Big 12 with Cincinnati and a few others 2 years ago that really got that started. And now the Big 10 is having to adjust. We've known for years that the likelihood of probably four, major power conferences, super conferences was coming. But we're all expanding. We're all growing. We're all adding new parts.
Physically?
And key parts to what we do.
We're expanding. Yeah, we're right here.
My bad.
It's good to see you, Bill.
You too.
Hey, Bill.
Yeah.
This is Bill Landis. He's just walking through.
I'll see you guys soon.
See ya.
Oh, okay.
See
We'll
ya,
see you soon.
Bye, Bill.
Talk about growing and expanding. Wow, how about the podcast?
We want to be sure that everyone understands that growth is inevitable, change is inevitable, and that's something Kevin Warren talked about today, and he was pretty on point with it. They know they have to adjust. The old way of doing things can't happen anymore. So you can't just say, well, we're going to sign these contracts and nothing else will ever change. You need to say, hey, whatever happens 3 months from now, we're going to adjust in 3 months from now. And it's the same thing on the field for all these teams with the name, image, and likeness, the transfer portal, now the NCAA saying as many transfers as you want. It doesn't have to be just a one-time free transfer. Like, the game is changing, and Ryan Day talked about it so much here last year that he was afraid that we weren't going to recognize the game in 5 years. And here we are only a year later, and it's already getting to a point where the entire dynamic of college football has changed. And for me, looking ahead to tomorrow, that's one of the things I'm most interested to hear Ryan Day talk about, because Ohio State has been doing this dance, this delicate, like, we want to attack NIL, but we also want to make sure we're following every single rule. But as Kevin Warren talked about today, there are no rules.
Yep. We haven't reacted to anything in a while together. I don't love the expansion of the Big Ten. And for me, I think it's probably heading towards 20, right? If I had to make my bet, that's what's going to happen for the Big Ten. Or whatever name they may come up with, just the B1.
Well, I think there's going to be 4 20-team conferences, I think, is where you go.
Yeah, that seems even overkill to me. But
I just like to have 4 because I like the playoff to be
that would be easy.
2 brackets.
Speaking of which, Kevin Warren staunchly in favor of expanding the playoff, made that very clear also on Tuesday. But it's strange to me if that's what winds up happening, and you're adding USC and UCLA to this mix, and let's say if they were able to land the holy grail out there of Notre Dame and partner that with Stanford.
Yeah, and then Duke and North Carolina. Bang.
Yeah.
Let's call it a day.
Duke and North Carolina. No thanks.
I love basketball.
What are you going to wind up then with? You're going to have basically a Pacific 10 and a traditional Big Ten. They won't be able to play each other every year. They won't be able to play each other every 5 years. I'm curious what we've actually accomplished if they're now just one gigantic conference and then the divisions now align like they used to, and you've complicated the travel from coast to coast with those two teams or 3 teams on the left one and Rutgers and Maryland on the right, and you're going, thousands of miles to play games. I don't understand what's being accomplished other than gobs of money. And
well, make no mistake, that was the first thing that Commissioner Warren said. They're now in the 3 major TV markets. So that is what drives this. And so everything else that happens from here is going to be a byproduct of how does the Big Ten continue to make more money? You expand the footprint, you grow more, you put yourself in these positions where you have, they're going to continue to say, we're worried about the student athletes and how we grow as a conference academically, which is why Notre Dame and Stanford that'd be a home run on that front. But it's still always going to be about money. And how do you figure out how to do all the logistical stuff? Maybe that's why Jim Harbaugh was like, I don't know how conference schedules work, because maybe he doesn't know how.
Maybe that was the most honest answer.
Maybe, because we have no idea how they're going to be able to structure this in the near future.
Did you like the move or not like the move? USC.
I don't care for it because it just doesn't make sense to me in a logistical standpoint, but I do get it from a TV standpoint. And again, because everything has to be viewed through that lens, I guess I like it. I like the fact that we'll be able to see California every year pretty much in some way, shape, or form. But I don't know that I really think it helps really from a recruiting standpoint, because at this point, especially when you're talking about brands like Ohio State and others, like that brand is so big that they're already recruiting nationally. Now, does it open a few doors out in California? Does it make it easier for a kid to stay home or to say, hey, I'm going to go to Ohio State because we'll be able to play at home? Sure. But it doesn't matter to Ohio State. Purdue's not going to get any more players in California
Sure.
than they do now. So I don't know how it really helps the league other than from a money situation.
And do you agree with my assessment that Kevin Warren is settling more into this role? I feel like I'm almost a contrarian at this point, but I was very critical of him in this very place last year, and I thought that was on point. The Big Ten was soft pedaling. They were on the back foot. They were caught off guard by the Texas and Oklahoma move. And, you're like, what is the Big Ten going to do? Well, we're going to let the dust settle.
Yeah.
We're going to evaluate. We're going to wait. And I thought that they didn't project the strength of the league that actually makes the most money, more than the SEC. People, have this conversation all the time. The SEC is the most.
Yeah, SEC may mean more, but the Big Ten makes more.
Yeah, it makes more. That's great. That's well done there. And I thought it was out of place today. Now, maybe it's because of what happened last year that they've also made an aggressive move, but they're also talking more aggressively. And that, just for example, with the playoff conversation, let's forget about the expansion part. So, we're going to look at all the options. They're going to present this stuff. The Big Ten needs to say what they want because they're going to get what they want. The SEC and the Big Ten are going to make the rules, and you can't let the SEC dictate that to a team, a conference, a league that has as much tradition and power as the Big Ten does. And I thought that he's done a better job of that. And obviously part of that is he's now another year into this. He's, the situation has changed where they've actually pulled off an aggressive move and a coup. But I thought that he aced this assignment much more than he did last year.
Sure. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, we can objectively look at his first year and a half in the league as the commissioner and realize it was obviously not an easy time for anyone. He walked into a situation that was out of control.
Yeah.
Did the Big Ten handle everything with COVID and heading into last summer's, the Texas and Oklahoma expansion poorly? I think so.
Yeah.
But a commissioner and a leader, like, his job is to steward and to steer the ship. It is obviously a lot easier to steer the ship when the waters are smooth. Right now, the waters are smoothing out. Smoothing? Smoothing?
Smoothing.
They're smoothing out.
Schmooze.
They're smoothing. And so once, I think it's great for the league that it appears to be smoothing out, but the question has to be, did the rocky waters that when he started prepare him for the next road of it, or the next wave that comes? Because as we're saying, college football is changing. There are going to be other waves coming.
Yeah, you'd have to hope that you took something out of that. I think that was something that he tried to say a year ago. Everything that happened, no regrets. We're going to learn from that. If that informed, I don't fully buy into this, USC, UCLA conversation was happening a year ago. Just couldn't talk about it publicly. I think it transpired in reality much more quickly than that. But if that's the case, and I'm right about that, well, then they acted decisively and aggressively. And again, Ohio State and Gene Smith deserve a lot of credit for this as well. This is not purely about Kevin Warren, but I think we hear a lot of feedback and questions on message boards like at rivals.com that I'll never forgive Kevin Warren for what he did initially. And that's fair. Anyone can feel however they want about it.
People said the same thing about Gene Smith for the last 12 years. He obviously presided over the Jim Tressel situation, and everyone blames him for that. The 2012 season not having an opportunity to win a national championship. People are going to hold those grudges. Bottom line, if it wasn't for Gene Smith, the Big Ten wouldn't be in the position it's in. Ohio State certainly wouldn't be in the position it's in with its athletic program. And now the Big Ten, obviously Jim Delaney built a lot of this stuff, and it's up to Kevin Warren and his team to keep it going. And so I agree that the posture today was positive. It was very assertive, and every other adjective that was linked to that: assertive, bold, strong,
strength.
I mean, strength in all its forms was the message, and that's day one of Big Ten Media Day.
Yeah, if we'd played a drinking game this morning,
smoothing,
we probably wouldn't have had to drink a lot for that, but strength, we would have been in trouble. It would have been.
So what's tomorrow's?
Tomorrow.
Oh. Let's prophecy.
Oh,
prophesy.
Let's make some bold predictions, perhaps.
Well, bold prediction for Ohio State tomorrow is that Ryan Day is going to focus on his team and try to avoid all of the peripheral garbage that is out there around college football. That's my prediction.
Yeah, I think that I'm interested to hear what word he chooses to describe this challenge for Ohio State. I bet what we're going to hear a lot is motivation, but I wonder if there's, a way, a slogan that he's been using over the summer. That used to be maybe more common with Urban Meyer, with the edge and the chase and all those sorts of things.
The wolf?
Yeah, the year of the wolf.
That was the weirdest one.
That hasn't necessarily been Ryan Day's forte. We know that Mickey Marotti was using the score in Ann Arbor last year as a big motivator. So I think that for these three guys, I mean, C.J. Stroud has become the face of the sport, one of the faces of the sport for sure. I know that Ohio State is anticipating him getting a number of questions about NIL because he's making, frankly, as much or more money than anybody else in the country.
Do you think that he's driving everyone over in his Bentley?
Well, he's probably got a private jet by now.
That's a good idea.
And
it's for any NIL, savvy companies in the Columbus area who want to reach out to CJ Stroud about a private jet, I think now's the time.
And reach out to us as well.
Yeah,
as we get started on the podcast, you can certainly advertise with us if you have a private jet, because we travel a good amount too, including to Indianapolis. But I think it'll just be about the motivation for this team. I want to hear about the football stuff. I don't want to be bogged down with expansion, name, image, and likeness, and all these other issues that, to me, we're a week away from camp.
Yeah.
I'm no longer interested in those storylines. I'm ready to talk about a national championship potential team and, what the offensive line depth is going to look like, or how Josh Proctor's doing after a full summer. Those are the things that I want to know about.
It's been a crazy quiet summer, and I think that what you just said, like, camp starts next week, and it doesn't feel that way. And maybe, we've had no off-field news at Ohio State. No, nothing's going on. And so maybe the Buckeyes are just trying to sneak up. I mean, obviously they're going to be the prohibitive favorite to win the league. They are the prohibitive favorite to win the league. But I think they're just trying to keep themselves under the water as much as they can before busting out.
It was nice of them not to make any news while we didn't have anywhere to talk about it. But I
talk about stuff to myself at home.
But now we get to talk to everybody on.
I like talking to myself, though, because I generally find that I agree with myself, which is good, because I like to be agreed with.
Well, I guess that's a lot better than talking to me, but you're stuck with me anyway. I'm Austin Ward. He is Jeremy Birmingham. This has been the podcast coming to you from Indianapolis at Big Ten Media Days. We'll be back tomorrow, day 2, Wednesday. Ohio State takes center stage. We will have full coverage coming for you on the podcast. We'll see you there.